Good morning, everyone. This is Melissa Schwartz. Hold on one second. My sound was on, obviously it's not. All right. Nope. Try the little tab in the corner of your screen. I was muted. We're trying to fix a little sound here. Did you get it? It shows it as well. Good morning. Well, we're not quite sure why we're getting an echo here. We'll try to figure that out. I'm Melissa Schwartz. I'm the managing broker of the Paradise Valley office. We have Julia Quintana here from Rock Title to speak on seller impersonation on fraud. I'm going to go ahead and hopefully you can see her camera. Oh, your camera's off and your mic is off.
Well, I tried muting myself to see if that would. Okay, does that work?
You've got an echo on you. All right, I'm going to go try to see if I can do this. Get her sound off.
You go ahead.
I've done it a few different ways and it's still. I can find out what part while you're figuring. Yeah, I've done that and it shows off there.
And then I went into my settings here and it showed off. The settings. Oh, hold on. Sorry, folks, we're trying to get rid of a second sound here. We've got two different things and we've got an echo. Microphone is fine.
Yeah, all sound devices.
Let's see that. There we go. Okay, I think we. Okay, woohoo! A computer geek in
disguise. That's right.
Okay, today we're going to be talking about seller
impersonation fraud. It's actually one of the fastest growing crimes. And okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, did it go to this next slide?
I see it on mine. I don't know why this one didn't turn. That's weird.
Okay, well, volunteer. So, okay, so as long as online,
yeah,
does everyone see the fraudster? Okay, so fraudsters, they're impersonating property owners and illegally selling commercial, residential, and a lot of land as well. They are getting the property owner's social security and driver's license numbers. And they are using legitimate notary credentials. What that means is they're actually either using notaries or they are copying, because you can go onto the notaries. When you get your notary commission, you get authorization to order a stamp. So everything we do, we stamp, and it's easy to copy them. You can pull
it off of any recorded document, and they're usually black and white. Some states do have where you actually have an emboss, where you actually take and emboss the paper, and then you have to shade the notary stamp. But unfortunately, Arizona is not one of those states that really utilizes that. They prefer to use email and text as a form of communication. One of the things that they do is they will target, and sometimes it's a pretty long setup. So sometimes they'll be working on this for months or years, where they are collecting all the data. They're setting up like a back end so that everything looks more substantial, that they are the seller. There are property monitoring services that a lot of the counties have set up as well. So Maricopa County, actually, if you go on to Maricopa County, they have recently set up a Maricopa title alert. Okay, so I'm doing more research on.
I'm gonna ask you to
Mhm.
go backwards. I'm so sorry. I stopped. I did not do my recording, so I'm gonna
Oh,
go
okay, you want me
back.
to start?
I do.
Okay. Hi, good morning.
We are recording now. We will flip
Okay,
back a screen.
okay, I'm back
Sorry
to,
about that.
okay,
Explain to people why what happened. Sorry.
that's okay.
Just introduce.
Okay. Good morning. This is Julia Quintana, and we're going to be talking this morning about seller impersonation fraud. One of the fastest growing crimes. And fraudsters are doing quite a bit. They're impersonating the seller. So they're illegally selling commercial, residential, as well as a lot of vacant land. They're sophisticated. They're obtaining social security numbers, driver's licenses, as well as legitimate notary credentials. So they're either, in some cases, they're using notaries, and in other cases, they're pulling copies of the notary stamps off of other documents that the notary has previously notarized and using those copies of those stamps on documents to record. Fraudsters prefer to use email and text as communication, allowing them to mask themselves to commit crimes from anywhere. The state is actually, some of the county recorders have actually started putting some stuff in place. I'm sure you've heard the commercials for Title Lock. Recently, Maricopa County just launched a Maricopa Title Alert, where you can actually go on to the Maricopa County recorder's website and you can opt in. So if you go to the Maricopa County, it'll pull up at the recorder's office the Maricopa Title Alert, and you can, if you click the learn more, you can go ahead and input your name. When I went in and registered, it allowed me to put my husband's name, my name, our trust name. We've also got assets in an IRA, so I was able to link to my email for notification all the different variations of how I hold title on different properties. So you can do it all associated in with one account. So you don't have to set up a separate alert for each type. So again, I have some properties in my trust. I have some properties my husband owns, some I do, and some are IRA. So under my email, I was able to set up an alert account for all the different ways I hold property. Okay. One of the things to really watch for are there's red flags. So if the property is vacant or non-owner occupied, such as an investment property, a vacation rental property, or again, vacant land is a big target. If the address of the is different for the on the tax record. So if you go into the tax record and it shows, the situs address, which is the property address, and it has a different mailing address for the seller, these are ones that one of the ways that they're realizing that the seller is not local to the property, that the seller isn't living in the property. Some people have actually gone as far as, when I've closed transactions, they've asked me, even though it's going to be an investment or a second home, they've asked me to list the primary address for the tax bill as the property, even though they're not going to be residing in it. And they'll just pull the tax bill from the county when it comes due, instead of having it where it looks like it's a non-owner occupied property. No outstanding mortgages is more. They're obviously they'll get more equity out of it, and it's easier because they don't have to have the seller's social to be able to complete the transaction, because if there's a payoff on the property with the mortgage, title's required to get a payoff from the lender, and they require us to provide between 4 and 6 digits of the social. Some lenders are requiring 6 digits of the social instead of just the last 4. Chase has been one that for quite a few years has required 6 instead of 4. Another red flag is that the property is being sold well below market value. Okay, so that's another red flag. Considered heightened scrutiny and halt a transaction when you see these different red flags. So you want to just make sure that you've got your eyes wide open. If you start seeing different things coming up, if they want a quick sale, usually less than 3 weeks, and they may not even negotiate any fees. They're just gonna a quick sale, accept whatever offer you send in. They want a cash buyer. Obviously, there's less scrutiny from less people looking at it if there's not a lender involved. They're refusing to attend the signing. They claim to be out of the state or out of the country. They're difficult to reach via phone and only want to communicate by text or email, or refuse to meet with a video call. So if you're getting weird sense, you may ask them to hop on a Zoom call. They're not, and then record it. They're not going to want to hop on a Zoom call where you're going to have face of them if they're a fraudster. So if you start getting a weird sense in your gut that I'm not so sure this seller is the seller, ask them to hop on a Zoom call. Hey, you know what? I'd love to meet you. I haven't met you. Let's go ahead and let's talk about this and the other, but I'm going to send you a link to hop on a Zoom call.
And just to bring up a point, I know on the last slide, you said that usually there's no lien, but they are now seeing these fraudsters willing to pay off a lien because they still get the money. And so somehow they're getting, like you said, some of the social security info and being able to clear that hurdle.
They haven't linked it back, but in
My thought process, remember a few years back, we had that huge Equifax breach? Equifax quite often you've got former address. What scares me the most is that one of the security things that we're using is RON Notary, which is a remote online notary. Because if you've ever tried to set up that with the DMV to be able to do stuff online, it has where you have a series of questions like, which of these addresses have you lived at? Which of these places have you worked? Which of these? And a lot of those questions are stuff that's going to show up on your credit report. So if they've gotten your data from the Equifax breach, they're going to have a lot of those questions that are asked, because it's going to have all your former employers on there. It's going to have all your former addresses on there. So that is even a tight thing to watch for. So they'll and again, that's where if you have a lot of, obviously if your payoff is about equal to your mortgage, you don't have as much of a problem. If the property is free and clear, I've actually seen people go to links where they record a false lien against a free and clear property. To where it's not a real mortgage. It's looks like a private note from a family member. So I've had some people that have some huge land investments out in the West Valley, and they've actually had their parents that have a different last name do private deed of trust and recorded it against the property, so it looks like it's encumbered about to its worth. Because obviously, why would you go after something if you had to pay off the whole thing? And then plus with it being their parents, if somebody was to reach out to request a payoff, they'd be like, sell the land, and nope, we're not. So it's another way people are trying to protect themselves. Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah. It's crazy. They're gonna want their proceeds wired. It's amazing. I had a lender last month that screwed up. Okay. I had wired in a secure email wiring instructions. And when it came time to wire, their funder was out of East Coast and it was a Friday and they were in a hurry to leave and they just wired. They never called and confirmed my wiring instructions. And they lost $387,000. And and it was gone within hours. So it hit that bank and it was right back out of that bank because with the wire. And so, yeah, I kept saying, I need your Fed Reserve. I need, if you really sent the wire at this time, you should have a Federal Reserve number by now. They're like, oh no, and they just took their time. And by the time they finally gave me the Fed Reserve numbers, I had my banking check and everything else, and that money was long gone. And this was like in a matter of 3 hours. So, I'm going, hey, you said normally a wire only takes like 10 minutes to go through the Federal Reserve. It's like what takes the longest when you're ordering a wire is getting the person at the bank to sit at the desk and input it. When I input a wire and then we approve it, it only takes like 10 to 15 minutes to go through the Federal Reserve and hit that other bank. And is like when it hits my bank, it'll shoot me an email that, hey, this wire just came in from this source. And they said at like 10 o'clock in the morning that they had wired. And I'm going, okay, so like an hour, hour later, I'm like, hey, I still don't have it. I started asking for the Fed ref number. They didn't take it serious and hop on it. And by the time they finally gave me the Fed Reserve and we realized, finally, I'm like, where did you wire to? I've checked with my banking department. I've checked with our personal banker. We don't have the money. And then they sent me over these wiring instructions that showed it went to Bank of the West in San Francisco. I'm like, nope, not my bank. So yeah, so I'm sure somebody got fired on Monday morning. The lender had to fund again they funded again on Wednesday. It took Wednesday because they had to file a claim and open a fraud thing and the whole 9 yards. But yeah, their funder did not call and verify the wiring instructions. I have no idea who sent them to them or where they got them, but they said, oh yes, we see the secure email you sent on this day. I don't know why they used this other one that came from God knows where.
Wow.
Yeah, 387,000 last month. Yeah, so it's crazy. So they demand their proceeds to be wired. If it smells funny, one of the things that we can do is we can send out via check, because a check is going to give us some more time to verify stuff. But usually if we start getting red flags, you're getting red flags from the front, from the beginning, and you should reach out to your title company, because we have additional stuff we can search on the backside. We can do clues things. We can do a lot of additional research. Another thing is they want to use their own notary. Okay. We don't allow them to use their own notary. I always tell them, hey, we're insuring the transaction. Our notary service has has $2 million in E&O coverage. So we're going to use our notary. One of the things that I do that a lot of other notaries don't do, in some states, they require a thumbprint in your notary ledger to transfer properties. If you've ever been at one of my signings, I always require buyer and seller a thumbprint. And when they go, oh, I never had to do that before, I just explain, I'm insuring the transaction. And if we get drug into court, I have to bring my notary ledger. And it's hard to say your thumb wasn't there. If it's a fraudulent seller, they are not going to give you your thumbprint. And if they will not give me a thumbprint, I will not close the transaction. It's as simple as that. I don't care how good your fake ID is, which they've gotten really good, but your thumb, and they don't expect it until they get there. I had one last week that was adamant, but he's a cybersecurity guy and so was freaked out. So I turned it over to my corporate compliance and had them put this guy through the ringer, verifying he was really him, because he refused to give a thumbprint. And I was not closing without somebody from corporate doing a deep dive on this guy and confirm it, because he was just adamant was not going to give his thumbprint. So you want to take precautions. So contact the seller directly with an independent phone number that you find. You can mail the seller at the address on the tax records. You can ask real estate, obviously the realtor, if they have a personal knowledge of the person, and if they've known them and built a relationship over time, because a lot of the transactions are referrals. So if I get a weird sense on a file, I'm gonna reach out and say, hey, do you know this guy? One of the red flags for me is when a deal falls out of the sky. I'm like, because we know in our business, we have to work for every transaction that we have. So if you have a deal that falls out of the sky, it probably is too good to be true. And it's like, why are they picking me to send this deal to? I've never reached out. I've never marketed them. I mean, you guys know how much money and time you spend on marketing. So if a deal falls out of the sky, there's the first red flag right there. Okay.
Yeah, I would say, folks, if you are not a major top producer, there is no reason for somebody to have selected your name out of the 70,000 agents in this valley to all of a sudden get this, $1 million or even $700,000 land deal that, they have the choice of 70,000 agents but you were the one they called. Yeah. Think
Mhm.
twice about that one.
One of my favorite websites to use, it's called Fast People Search. And on here, you can put in a name and a city. You can put in a phone number. So if they've called you, put their phone number in, see who it shows that phone number really belongs to. This website is scary accurate. I mean, there's obviously some stuff with time delays and everything else, but for the most part, it's pretty accurate. You can put the address in and it'll show you who resides at that property. I use this all the time. So you can go to, so you get a property address, you can go on the assessor and it'll show you the assessor. They show this is Philip Dill is the owner of this property that I just pulled up through records. Okay, so then I can go on to my Fast People Search. I can put in that address and it shows that they show Philip Dill there as well. Then I can also scroll down and it shows, shows that he's currently at that, and it shows that he's approximately 57 years old. So if I have a 65, 70-year-old seller and I have, or if this shows they're 35 and you have a 60-year-old seller, so this is going to give you a rough age. Obviously, some people hide their age better than others, but at least it gives you a ballpark. Okay. It also gives you a series of phone numbers for Philip. Okay, so so I would actually call this phone number directly. So even if, so if I got a call for a deal from another one, I would search out what records show his phone number is for Philip Dill and just call him. Just say, hey, you know what? I was just following up on our conversation on your property. I wasn't sure if you wanted, if you wanted the sign, on the left side of the yard, the right side, whatever. Just come up with something. And if they go sign, what sign? You assume we have a problem. But yeah, independently see if you can find a phone number. This is one of the better sites to use to find it. And it'll give you landlines and wireless and VOP and everything else. Okay. Out-of-state owners. Okay. A neighbor usually has an emergency contact number. On all my rental properties, I have the neighbors on both sides contact information so that they can call me and I can call them if they're in the event of an issue. So go knock on the neighbor, either search on here, you can pull up and find the address of the house next door. And then you can go on People Search, see who's at that address and a phone number. And you can ask them, hey, you know what, I'm the realtor working on the sale next door. I was wondering, do you have the contact number for, because the next door neighbors usually, when it's a rental property or a vacation, or like if they're using it as an Airbnb, they want to know if there's a problem before the city shows up or the police show up. So the neighbors will have a contact number for that missing person. Okay, so you can go knock neighbor doors. If you're having trouble finding a neighbor, just go to the property and just start knocking on the doors around. Hey, I'm working on selling the house next door. I was wondering, what contact number you have for the seller. I'm having trouble reaching them, and just see and reach out to the seller directly. Okay. Again, they have that you can require the notarization to be performed by a vetted, approved remote online notary. So, but again, a lot of the questions that are in that sequence are things that would have been on the Equifax breach. So even that is kind of, yeah. So obviously you want to try the never, ever, we never let them select the notary. Never. There's never in an instance that's acceptable. Additional notary precautions. Again, the remote online notary uses the verification service, and it won't let them proceed with the signing prior until they pass it. So they can get a few wrong, and then they have to do it like 2 or 3 times, because obviously I don't remember, my first address that I lived in after high school. Do you? I'm like, I've had a few addresses since then. So it lets them try to go through the series of questions a few times, and then if they fail that, then it shuts it down. But my favorite thing is the thumbprint, because if there's some states that require, so California is one that you cannot notarize a document to transfer ownership of real property without a thumbprint. I would love to get Arizona set up that way. I've got in a couple legislators' ears trying to get some stuff drafted. But with fraud on the rise, if you require a thumbprint, again, they're not gonna, it's a little hard to impersonate a thumbprint. You can send, I'm trying to locate some of these credential analysis companies, but they have, or you can send a link to a identification verification that it's a third-party service, but it has credential analysis, KBA. I'm not familiar with those. Have you ever worked with any of those? Yeah. Yeah. So you can run the seller's email and phone number through a verification program. Again, I'm not familiar with that. I've never done it before. You can ask conversational questions regarding the property, because if they know if it's really their property, for example, if it's it's a big land parcel, okay, you can ask them, is there a well on a well on the property, or is there a neighboring property that there's a shared well with that they're using? Or, I mean, you can ask different questions about the property that wouldn't be on public records. Things, that are really going to trip them up. If it's not their property, they're not going to be familiar with the stuff that you're asking regarding the property. And then you obviously can conduct additional due diligence as necessary. We have where if we're doing a transaction, we can ask for a statement of identity. We had one that smelt like a fraudulent file a couple of months ago, and so the buyer said, I'm not feeling this. I'm just getting red flags on this. So I said, okay, well, what we're going to do? We're going to do the opening package, and even we're going to request a statement of identity from the seller early on, and just start asking for a bunch of detailed stuff. And if it's really the seller, they'll just think I'm a pain in the rear. If it's not, they'll go off into the wayside. And sure enough, they went off into the wayside and just went dark, and started ghosting everybody, because we started asking for a bunch of information and a bunch of data that if they weren't really the seller, they wouldn't be able to provide. So it has that you can compare their signature. If you go onto county records, you can see if they when they bought the property, if there was an acceptance, they would have signed the acceptance. If they've ever had a deed of trust recorded against it, they're going to have that signature. But a lot of times they're copying that signature. So you want to watch that. If that signature is exactly like that signature, then that's probably where they got the signature, is from a recorded. Some states have started to redact the signatures now so that they can't do that. So that they can't copy them, because there's more of a risk of them copying them than using it as a check to make sure that they match. Another thing is you'll see on the fraudulent driver's license, where the signature at the bottom of the driver's license is exactly like the prior deed of trust that they signed. And their signature is like exactly the same everywhere that it is, which is not normal. Yeah. on the title side, we control the disbursement. So we want to use wire verification services to confirm that the distribution and the authorization and the bank. One of the things with our bank that we use, we have to supply the address that they currently have on file for the person that we're wiring to. And it has to match at the bank on the other side, otherwise it'll bounce. So it's not just a name, but it's the address linked to the account. I had never thought until recently of, people would send me a copy of a voided check, and I'm like, well, a voided check doesn't really work. But because a lot of banks don't use the same routing as at the bottom of the check. But if the fraudsters are just opening the account, most of these accounts are a one-time use. They'll open the account, they'll get the wire in, they'll wire right back out, and that's it. They're not going to order checks. So if you're asking and checks take a little while to get. So if you're asking for a copy of a voided check, they're not going to be able to, at the 11th hour, they're not going to be able to get you one at the 11th hour because they don't have an account, And so, I mean, obviously they could forge one, but they're not going to be able to send it to you in 3 minutes, so. Require that a check be sent to the seller rather than proceeds. That just takes longer for it to clear. Our checks are not cashier checks, they're trust account checks. So they don't usually put as long of a hold. But again, if it's a fraudster, they're not going to want to go into the bank and deposit the check because they're going to be on camera, other than you still have the camera at the ATM. But obviously at the ATM, they could show up with a mask on and the ATM's still going to let them deposit stuff. If they go into the bank with a mask on, not so lucky. Yeah. So so a check will buy us some more time, but I don't like to, if there's, I want to rule the fraud out early on in the transaction. I don't want to wait till all the way at the end when I'm dispersing. So. There's places to report fraud. Okay, so there's IC3.gov, there's your local law enforcement, there's your state law enforcement, including the State Bureau of Investigation and the State General, and then there's the Secretary of State for notary violations. So again, for the notary, you don't know whether the notary is part of the problem, and they've, one of the things here in Arizona, to get your notary commission, you log online, you buy a $25,000 bond, you fill out an online application, you upload the bond to the Secretary of State, and then in a couple of weeks when they're done processing the paperwork, you get a commission emailed to you that you can print out and go get a stamp. In California, you have to sit through an 8-hour class. You have to pass a test that you know what you're doing, which scares me. Here, I'll have notaries that just got their thing and they want me to be their guinea pig. And then you just take it down and you get your stamp, and voila, you're a notary. And so some of the fraudulent stuff there's no background check. Whereas in California, you have to do a full hand scan and a full background check, and it adds like another 6 weeks. I mean, it takes a lot to become a notary. Here in Arizona, I did all my stuff on Thursday night, and I got my stamp and everything on Friday, and I started at Rock Title on Monday. And it's crazy. So the Secretary of State, you can also pull up notaries on the Secretary of State, and you can look for violations. So if there's already been complaints or different things up on that notary, you'll be able to see it online. But usually if you have the notary stuff, it's usually too late already, unless you have it and you haven't recorded. But that's, again, if you're using someone else's notary, which we never, ever, ever allow to use someone else's notary. I'll even find the note. If it's a remote area and my signing service can't locate one, I'll call a title company that services that area, and I'll send them to that title company. I will not let them use somebody that they know or go to their bank themselves. Now, if it's a buyer and it's their acceptance, fine. They could get that signed anywhere. I don't really care, because if it's a cash buyer and it's their acceptance, of their final vesting. I don't have a problem with that. But it's any seller, I'm not gonna let them take the documents and go to their own bank. If anything, I'll find a local bank and send them there, or I'll find a title company that services real estate in that area. And I'll call other listings, or, it's like, we'll find someone that we're controlling it and that we know that they carry a minimum of 2 million in E&O. So. Yeah, and to be a notary, all you have to do is a 25,000 bond. That's it. No E&O is required. We require 2 million individual notaries. So like the notaries that are with the signing service will require the notary to have 100,000, and then they fall, the 2 million falls under the signing service, which is why when I'll have people, oh, my neighbor just became a notary, can you use her? No, but I can hook her up with the signing service, because the signing service will make sure that she's trained, that she knows how to do loan docs, that she knows how to properly notarize stuff, since we have no classes in Arizona, and we'll take responsibility for this person. It's like if they, so I'll refer them there. The signing service will vet out to confirm if they even know what they're doing. So on Maricopa County, there's additional scam alerts right now. So there is a mail scam alert, and it's from the treasurer's office, and it's where people are getting notices that they have tax liens, and it's saying for them to call in. So here is a sample of one. This here is a state tax lien for $98,000. And it says to call in, and then it says that they can settle for less. And so, to call into this phone number, okay, it looks legitimate. People are falling for it. They're calling in, they're settling for 40,000, and they're wiring up 40,000, or they're giving up their credit card for 20,000. And it's a total scam. The county treasurer will never call you. They will never send you a paper that says for you to call. So that's one of the scams that's going around right now. Another one is they're texting saying that they're past due, and that they're going to foreclose, and that they need to call in. They can take a credit card, and and then there's also the phone scams. So it's the scammers are on high alert. I mean, just it's crazy, the stuff that they're coming up with. And I was looking for some of those sample IDs, because I was going to put them in here, but I was having trouble finding any. I found a couple of YouTube things where it talked about them, and there was a really good one that I found where he explains how he's a bouncer, and he was going through on how to check, because there's the old 2014 and prior, and it has the extra things to look for, and then it has the newer ones and the things to look for. So I highly suggest, if you feel something's out of place, take a look at their ID ahead of time, but look at some of these YouTube videos on how to spot fraudulent and things to look for on an ID. To be more specific, but the biggest thing is, don't keep your gut to yourself. If you're feeling just a weird thing, hey, this file fell from the sky and I just want to have our eyes wide open. I'd love to think it's too good to be true, and sometimes it is. Sometimes it'll be a valid transaction. Sometimes it is family out of state, and so they don't really know any realtors here. So nobody's marketed to them because they're in another state, and they may see that you closed a transaction in that area for someone else. And it's amazing how they find your stuff, so it might be a valid thing. But if it falls from the sky, have your eyes wide open. If you are sensing anything weird, ask questions about it. I'm really trying to be diligent on because a trust. Okay, so you have a trust and you have a successor trustee or whatever. Obviously, they need to have a death certificate if they've died, and it's hard to get a death certificate for somebody unless you have a real reason to get a death certificate. Believe me, I've tried. But it's like, but we're out of state, we don't have time. I'm like, we're supposed to close tomorrow, and you said you were going to send it to me, and you don't have one. It's like I gave them all away, because it's amazing, everybody wants one when someone passes. But there's we have to check. We have to check the signing authority. And same thing with on companies, corporations, we need to make sure that we've got the right person signing and the right authority, and that we're verifying their existence. Okay, I think we're
We have some questions.
questions.
You can put some questions in there if you want. I'm watching all of those, folks. The one thing that when I got a rundown of this, the fake IDs and setting up bank accounts, it never occurred to me that people could set up bank accounts as easily and as quickly as they could. And the reality is to get an LLC does not require any identification. You can go online and establish an LLC,
Pay $85.
pay a little money, and then with that information, you can go to the bank and say, I want to open a bank account for this. And again, if they've gotten a fake ID, nobody's going to question if you're John Smith and it's the John Smith LLC dated, October 1st, 2023. They're not, nobody's going to question that. They're going to let you establish all of that. And then once it starts rolling, they have more and more things. So asking for a utility bill could really throw them for a loop, because they won't have gotten a utility bill on that property if that's not their property. So there are little things like that that can throw curveballs into the situation if you just start asking questions.
If you start asking for stuff that they're gonna have a difficulty, or that they may start realizing you're on to them, and they'll just ghost you and just go away. And to where, when we have one that it just seems, I have one that they're preying on elders, and it was a couple of months ago, and it was a file that dropped from the sky. It was for sale by owner, where the investor that was buying had drafted up the contract, and it was this little old senile guy that just lost his wife that was the seller. And we kept asking for the earnest money, and the buyer was ghosting us, and it had aura signs. And then finally I called the seller, and he is selling the house because he's got dementia and he needs to go into a home. He just could not understand anything. He just was all over the board. Offered to bring in, oh honey, if you need $1,000 for earnest money, I'll bring it down. I can bring it down today if you need. I'm like, no, the money's to protect you. I don't need your money. I need to hold it to protect you. So then I got earnest money, but it had nothing to do with anybody on the contract. And then when I questioned it, I got 4 assignments, and they went from $347,000 up to $444. Each assignment had a big jump on it. And so I talked with our compliance, and we just decided that, you know what, we just didn't want to be part of this transaction. So then when I called the seller, to let him know that we were going to decline doing the transaction, and I asked him if he had somebody, friend or family, that was helping him with the transaction. He said, no, I don't need any help. I already sold it. Yeah. And so just broke my heart, but I'm limited in what I can, because but then Will ended up with the same buyer, different property, different senile man. 3 weeks later, they accidentally had him call our main number here, and Marie, it forwarded to my assistant Marie, and she's like, no, that's not our transaction. And she pulled up the property address and saw that it was the same buyer, but it was out of Will's office, and it was a different senile old man. And so it's like, I had to raise it to compliance. I'm like, hey, I think they're back, but I think they're trying to hit the Chandler office now. But
So we're still trying to make that change.
no, it was a different old man, different
old
property, different old senile man, different,
Because they disappeared when they.
Yeah, another one is on the buy side. Okay, one of the things that right now is there's cashier checks, and then there's bank draft. A bank draft is kind of like a check. It's not like a cashier's check.
I have one right now that we've got a high alert on. It's a $2.4 million commercial deal that they just were adamant. They did not want to wire in the earnest money. It's 50,000 earnest money, and they didn't want to wire it in. So they sent a bank draft. Well, a bank draft is not a cash. It's not the same as a cashier's check. So what they do is they send a bank draft in. Escrow, if they don't know what they're doing, will post it in. And then they'll do their Benzer and they'll cancel the file, but they'll cancel it like next week. And then they'll think that it was a cashier's check because they don't realize the difference in a bank draft and a cashier's check. And so then they'll cancel the transaction and then escrow will refund them $50,000. And then at the end of the month or the beginning of the next month, they realize that that wasn't a cashier's check, that was a draft and it bounced. And so, yeah, so that's another one. So I have one right now that our bank just had us, we posted the receipt to the file, but I have the file where all funds are on hold that so nobody could accidentally release them. And they had us overnight the bank draft to our bank in California. And they're checking with, there's a bank that does the drafts. It's BMO that does a lot of the interface between the Canadian banks. And so we're waiting they're doing due diligence and research and making sure, but they said it'll probably be on hold for 30 days. And so my thing is, okay, well, are you working on your closing funds? Because I don't want to wire for the closing funds. We're not gonna do another bank draft because it's a $2.4 million commercial deal. I'm not gonna take a bank draft, sorry,
I
so.
didn't even know there was a bank draft.
I know, and that's where they're getting people, is people don't realize a bank draft looks really similar to a cashier's check, but it's not. It's like a counter check here.
Yeah.
So it's like if you don't have checks, you go to the bank and they give you a count. So a draft out of Canada looks like a cashier's check, but it's not. It's like a counter check here. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so so we're having to watch the buy side and the sell side because the buyers are depositing funds and then canceling the deal and trying to get the refund, but yet their funds really aren't good funds yet. So it's kind of like where they want to sell you some or buy something on Craigslist and pay you more.
That's right.
It's the same.
Something that comes to mind that could be very, very risky, especially for a lot of new agents that are getting started, is all these people that hit you up and they're like, "Yeah, I would like to represent you. I would like you to represent me." Kind of like a wholesaler, but you don't even know if they're actually wholesalers or they're actually from Italy. And for me, it's always going to be natural to ask certain questions. But now with getting some new members on the team that just started, they express some excitement, like, "Hey, this guy just reached out to me and he's got this, he's got that." I was like, whoa.
Let's stop and think about it. You've never closed a deal in your life and you spent $5 on marketing.
Yeah,
How did they even find you? And why would they want to use you? Just saying.
Yeah.
I know you're a pretty face, but yeah,
That's the big problem, right? Because
they're so
it's-
excited that they're.
you want to jump all over it because you're looking for business.
Did you ask for
But-
proof of funds? Like that's the first thing I think when somebody calls me and I do get this
Oh,
calls.
well, actually,
the
let's
thing is
talk
you
about proof of funds.
Proof of funds you need to validate. I had
Yeah,
I do
that's
a
a
lot
huge
of
one.
transactions. I had one last year that the buyer had sent in, they were gonna do cash. And their proof of funds was a letter from an attorney that they were going to have this insurance settlement. And that the settlement was supposed to be resolved by the state, but they'd already been awarded and they were working on getting the settlement from the insurance company, whatever. So they had this letter. And so we're delayed, we're supposed to close, everything else. So then it got delayed. So then the buyers are wanting pre-possession. Yes.
No,
Yes.
don't do prepossession.
The buyers wanted pre-possession because, and so then luckily the agent started doing some more research and looked up the attorney independently on her own, tried to find the attorney to verify the real, to get an updated status of this settlement or whatever. No attorney, no, it was all fraudulent.
Right.
So
And they almost had them move in. And when it was turned over to the FBI, they had done it before. They would get into a place and then the people would have to evict to get them out.
Yeah.
And it was a pattern. And so then they had like a gaggle of kids. They had like 7 kids. And so they would move into these places and then they would the owner would have to evict them to get them out. And then they would go do it again. And it was these agents that oh, buyer, I've got this
Brand
letter. Yeah.
new agent. So folks, this can happen to any of you with proof of funds. You do need to do some research. LinkedIn is a really great resource. If you've got somebody sending you proof of funds from a bank, look up the bank, look up who the officers are. If this is actually a legitimate person, you should be able to find them on LinkedIn and then phone the number on LinkedIn, not the phone number on the document, because I'm sure you could reach that particular individual at that phone number, but can you really reach them at the publicized phone number? Find out if they're legit, find out if they wrote the letter. Don't just throw it in your file, because we're seeing more and more of these that are actually fake. Don't ask me why they're doing this, but oftentimes we're seeing a bunch of this. If you start asking questions, as Julia said, they'll start to ghost you because they're not going to answer your questions if
Don't
you
take
start.
screenshots either.
Oh yeah, the
Or take
screenshots of proof of funds. A proof of funds have to tie back to that actual individual. So if it's John Smith, you have to be able to see that it says John Smith on that account. A screenshot that just says there's, I don't know, $1.2 million in the bank. Whose bank account is it? You don't even have a number or anything. You just have that there's $1.2 million in his account. Well, I can go onto Canva and create that screenshot for you in about 15 minutes. So you really have to be getting something that shows actual legitimate proof of funds. So please do some research. Thank you so much for coming today. Thank you, Rock Title and Julia, for giving us this breakdown. So important to stay on top of what is happening today. If you have any questions, please give me a call. If you've got a file that seems a little weird, don't forget to give me a call and let's go through what you have and make sure that we take care of it and get it, ask the right questions, get some answers, go to title, get them to ask some questions. Okay. Thank you guys. Have a great week. Enjoy. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Mel.
you.